My family drained $125,000 from my bank while I fought for my life, so I quietly recovered and taught them a lesson that ruined their lives. My family used my medical emergency as an excuse to empty my bank account. "You won't need this money anyway," my brother smirked. I said nothing while lying in my hospital bed, but 2 weeks later, they all learned exactly why. I guess I should start from the beginning. I'm a 32-year-old male, the oldest kid in the family, with a younger brother, Harry, now 29, and our parents, both in their early 60s. From day one, it was always me pulling the weight while everyone else just existed. When other kids were hanging out after school, I was stocking shelves at the local grocery store from the age of 16. Meanwhile, Harry was home playing Xbox and failing classes, but somehow that was always just a phase according to my parents. College was more of the same. I worked 2 jobs while studying software engineering and lived in a crappy apartment with 3 other guys. Harry got a full ride to some private university that my parents somehow afforded, where he changed majors 4 times before dropping out entirely. "Your brother is finding himself," Mom would say with that annoying, dismissive wave. "You've always been the responsible one." Yeah, no wonder why. After graduation, I kept grinding while friends were traveling and buying nice things. I drove a Honda with 200,000 miles on it, lived in a small apartment, and saved everything I could. By 30, I had built a career as a maritime risk consultant. Basically, I evaluate shipping vessels for insurance companies and make sure they're seaworthy before policies get issued. The job pays surprisingly well since not many people want to spend weeks on cargo ships in the middle of nowhere, and it requires constant travel plus specialized knowledge that took years to build. The irony of being a risk assessment specialist while completely missing the biggest risk in my own life was not lost on me. Harry never grew up. At 27, he was still living rent-free with our parents, working on his music and cycling through jobs that never lasted more than a few months. My parents' finances were a complete dumpster fire. They had remortgaged their house twice, Dad's business was failing because he kept hiring Harry's deadbeat friends, and Mom's part-time teaching barely covered her online shopping addiction. I should have seen the pattern years ago. It started when I was 27 and got a midnight call from Dad saying the IRS was coming after him for $7,000 in back taxes. I transferred the money immediately like a complete idiot. 6 months later, I still hadn't seen a penny back and had to threaten to skip family Christmas before they magically found the money to repay me. Then Harry got a DUI and needed $12,000 for a specialized lawyer. I never saw a cent of that either. Then came Mom's credit card debt, $9,000 that was just temporary until her sister paid back some imaginary loan, Dad's truck repairs, Harry's business opportunity selling protein shakes in an MLM garbage scheme. Every time I thought, this is the last one, they'll get it together after this. Spoiler alert, they never did. The requests just got more frequent and more expensive. When Harry totaled his second car in 2 years, they expected me to finance a new one. I refused. Mom wanted me to pay for her once-in-a-lifetime Mediterranean cruise they somehow couldn't afford despite Dad's business supposedly doing better. Another hard no. Dad even tried to add me as a guarantor on a business loan without telling me. I only found out when the bank called to verify my information. That was a hard pass and our first real blowout fight. He didn't speak to me for a month afterward. The final straw came last Thanksgiving. I had just gotten back from 3 weeks at sea inspecting vessels in Southeast Asia, was jet-lagged as hell, and just wanted to eat turkey and watch football. Instead, they ambushed me with paperwork for a $35,000 timeshare loan they wanted me to co-sign so we could all enjoy it as a family like I wasn't working 280 days a year. When I refused, Mom lost it over the pumpkin pie, going on about how they gave me life, fed me, clothed me, and I couldn't do this one thing for them. Dad stormed out and didn't speak to me for 2 months. Harry went nuclear, telling our extended family I was hoarding wealth while they struggled, and I started getting texts from cousins I see once every 5 years about how I should take care of the people who raised me. After that disaster, I finally grew a spine and set real boundaries. I changed my phone settings to send their calls to voicemail after 9 p.m., stopped answering financial emergencies immediately, and limited visits to twice a month instead of whenever they decided to drop by unannounced. They absolutely hated it. The guilt trips went into overdrive. Dad would call my office with fake medical emergencies that magically turned into requests for money once I called back panicking. Mom would show up at my apartment crying about bill collectors. Harry started bringing his deadbeat friends to my place to hang out, code for raiding my fridge and asking for loans. I held firm, but the stress was slowly killing me. I started getting migraines, lost 15 pounds, and couldn't sleep. My doctor said my blood pressure was way too high for someone my age and warned me that whatever was causing this stress wasn't worth my health. I should have listened. Instead, I kept working insane hours, kept pushing through constant headaches and exhaustion, and kept ignoring the stomach pain that started in February until I couldn't ignore it anymore. That's when everything went from bad to completely screwed. The stomach pain got worse, way worse. It started with what I thought was food poisoning from takeout, stomach cramps, fever, zero appetite. Like any guy, I ignored it, powered through, and lived on Pepto and crackers for a week while trying to keep up with client meetings and reports. The pain gradually moved to my right side, but a quick WebMD search convinced me it was just a pulled muscle from the gym, so I popped ibuprofen like candy and kept working. When you're self-employed in my industry, you don't get sick days, miss an inspection and some other consultant takes the next contract. By early March, I had dropped 15 pounds in a month without trying. Coworkers on my last vessel inspection were giving me weird looks. During a video call with an insurance client, the guy actually stopped mid-sentence to ask if I was okay because I was sweating through my shirt and wincing every few minutes. I told him it was just a stomach bug. He didn't buy it. My boss, Alex, finally had enough and basically ordered me to see a doctor. Technically he couldn't force me since I'm a contractor, but he made it clear no more jobs were coming until I got checked out. Lost income is a pretty effective motivator, so I dragged myself to urgent care. The doctor took one look at me and her whole demeanor changed. She immediately ordered blood tests and a CT scan. When she came back with the results, her expression said it all before she even opened her mouth. Your white blood cell count is through the roof, and you have what looks like a perforated appendix that's walled itself off into an abscess. I'm honestly shocked you're still walking around. She wanted me admitted immediately. Do not pass go, do not collect $200, get to the ER now. But being stubborn, I asked to go home and pack a bag first. At home, I called mom out of childhood habit. Despite everything, she was still my emergency contact. I told her I needed to go to the hospital and asked for a ride since I was in no shape to drive. Her first response, we were just about to have dinner. Can it wait until tomorrow? When I explained that no, my appendix was apparently trying to kill me and I needed to go now, her tone changed. She said of course they'd come right away, but first Dad needed to stop at the bank, priorities, right? They finally arrived at my apartment at 8 p.m. I had been waiting, slumped against the wall, barely conscious, for nearly 2 hours. Dad took one look at me and his first comment wasn't holy crap, you look terrible or let's get you help fast. It was, is your insurance up to date? These hospital bills can be murder. I was too out of it to register how messed up that was. I just mumbled that yes, my insurance was current and let them help me to the car. The ride to the hospital is mostly a blur. I remember mom asking if I had my wallet and phone and me showing them the pocket where I'd stuffed everything. The last clear memory I have is signing admission papers around 9 p.m. and giving the nurse mom's contact information as my emergency person. After that, everything goes dark. According to my medical records, which I read later, my condition was way worse than anyone thought. The abscess had fully ruptured by the time I reached the ER at 11 p.m. The infection had turned my abdominal cavity into a toxic waste dump. I went into septic shock during surgery, and they had to remove a section of my small intestine that had died from the infection. The next 12 days are just fragments in my memory, the feeling of antibiotics burning through my veins, the ceiling tiles I counted during transfers, the constant beeping of monitors, random moments of semi-consciousness where I'd see shapes moving but couldn't process what was happening. One memory stood out, my mother sitting beside my bed holding my limp hand while my father rummaged through my wallet at the foot of the bed. I thought it was a fever dream at the time. I've been on rough cargo ships in terrible storms where I genuinely thought we might sink. Had a close call with a partial hull collapse during an inspection, nearly fell overboard in the North Sea. None of that compares to having your body literally poisoning itself from the inside out. For those 12 days, I was completely at the mercy of the medical staff and my family. One of those groups was actually trying to save my life, the other. Well, that became clear on day 13. I finally regained actual consciousness in the ICU. My vision was blurry, but I could make out Harry sitting in the corner with AirPods in his ears, playing on a gaming laptop I'd never seen before. I asked about mom and dad. He barely looked up to tell me dad was dealing with insurance stuff and mom was getting food. Then he showed me his phone. He had been taking pictures of me in surgery, my actual internal organs visible in the photos. Who the hell does that? I asked for my phone. Harry said mom had it for safekeeping. I asked for water instead. When he stepped out to find a nurse, I noticed my laptop bag on the floor by his chair. My work laptop with all my client data that should have been locked in my apartment, not sitting in a hospital room. Even through the painkiller haze, alarm bells were going off. Something was very, very wrong. Harry wouldn't leave me alone with the staff for the rest of that day. Every time a nurse came in, he hovered like a weird helicopter parent. When I tried asking one nurse about using a phone, he immediately jumped in, saying the doctor recommended I shouldn't stress about work. The nurse gave us both a strange look but said she'd bring one later. The next morning was different. Harry wasn't there when I woke up, and a different nurse was checking my vitals. I managed to whisper my request for a phone again. This time, with no interference, she brought me a hospital phone without hesitation. I called Alex, my boss, with shaky hands and told him something was seriously wrong. My family had my phone, wallet, laptop, everything. His response wasn't what I expected. Jesus, man, we've been worried sick. Your mom called the office 3 days ago saying you had brain inflammation and would be out indefinitely, and that all communication should go through her from now on. My blood went cold. Brain inflammation? I had a ruptured appendix and sepsis, not brain inflammation. That was a straight-up lie to isolate me. Then it clicked. I asked Alex to contact my bank's fraud department, tell them I was hospitalized and concerned about unauthorized access. He promised to handle it and said he'd visit that afternoon. Before Alex could arrive, my parents showed up around noon. They made small talk about how I was looking better, even though I'm sure I still look like warmed over death. Then Mom casually mentioned they were looking into long-term care options near their house for a ruptured appendix. That made zero sense. I'd been told by the night nurse that I was improving and might go home in a week or so. I decided to test the waters and asked directly about my phone. It's safe at home, Dad said dismissively. You don't need to worry about that now. We've taken care of everything. When I pressed about what exactly they'd taken care of, they exchanged a look that set off every internal alarm I had. Bills, emails, letting your job know what's happening, Mom said, not quite meeting my eyes. We moved some money around to cover hospital expenses. Moved? What money? My voice was stronger now, fueled by rising suspicion. Dad just patted my hand and said, financial matters can wait, like I was a confused child. The moment they left for lunch, I called my bank directly. The customer service rep's hesitation when I asked about my balances told me everything before she even spoke. There have been multiple large withdrawals from your accounts in the past few days. Given your hospitalization, would you like me to place a fraud alert immediately? She read off the transactions while I felt the room spin. Over $125,000 gone in less than 2 weeks. When my parents returned, I pretended to be groggy and confused, but inside something had changed. These people, my own flesh and blood, had systematically robbed me while I was literally fighting for my life in a hospital bed. That afternoon, Alex arrived with 2 people, Ryan from our company's legal department and Ben, my old college roommate who now worked in financial crimes at the district attorney's office. Seeing their faces gave me some relief that I might survive this nightmare. Alex had brought me a small laptop. Ben immediately took control, explaining we needed to document everything: bank records, hospital timelines, visitor logs, security footage from my building. Then I realized how they'd gotten past my banking app security. They must have used my unconscious fingerprint for biometric authentication. Imagining that alone was sickening. Alex had already sent our company security guy to download footage from my apartment building's cameras. Meanwhile, the bank records painted an even more disturbing picture. The first transfer happened just 6 hours after my surgery while I was still in recovery, unconscious. Then came a series of withdrawals spread over the next few days, distributed across their various accounts. The final transfers happened around day 10 as my fever was finally breaking. They'd been careful, emptying one account at a time to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. What they hadn't counted on was that my job as a maritime risk consultant had made me obsessive about documentation. Ben helped me access cloud backups of my text messages and emails. That's when we discovered the real smoking gun: communications between my family members I was never meant to see. Dad, we need to move fast before he's coherent enough to check accounts. The doctor says with the infection he might be confused for weeks. Harry, I told you we should have gotten the financial POA forms ready before now. They discussed plans, new purchases, Harry's music career investment, not once expressing genuine concern about whether I would survive. I spent the next 2 weeks playing a dangerous game. On the outside, I was the weak, grateful son, slowly recovering and oblivious to their theft. I asked vague questions about my finances that allowed them to lie directly to my face day after day. Don't worry about any of that now, Mom would say, patting my hand with fake concern. We've got everything under control. Then I was discharged after 28 days, much earlier than my family had been expecting based on the long-term care story they'd been spinning. The look of absolute shock on Mom's face when the doctor said I could go home was genuine. Dad tried insisting I recover at their house until I was stronger. Yeah, right, like I was going to willingly put myself back under the roof of the people who robbed me blind. I shut that down immediately. The truth was I needed to be somewhere they couldn't control every aspect of my life. Mom drove me home, nervously chattering the whole time about how they'd taken care of everything, cleaned my apartment, paid my bills, Made sure my job was secure. Just listening to the lies pouring out of her mouth while knowing what they'd done made me feel physically ill. When we arrived at my place, surprise, they had changed the lock on my front door without mentioning it. Mom acted all confused about why her key didn't work. I just said I'd call my neighbor who had my spare key. She offered to wait, but I told her I needed to rest. Once inside and finally alone, the full extent of what they'd done hit me like a freight train. They had taken everything of value: my main laptop, tablet, external hard drives, financial documents, passport, even the small safe from my closet. Sentimental stuff wasn't off limits either. My grandfather's signed baseball and his vintage Navy dive watch were gone. What these idiots didn't know was that I'm paranoid by nature. Part of my job is documenting vessel conditions that might later be evidence in multi-million-dollar insurance claims, so I don't trust digital storage alone. I had a secondary backup drive hidden inside a hollowed-out book on my shelf. They missed it completely. They also had no clue about the cloud security system I'd installed after a break-in 2 years earlier. Every entry to my apartment was recorded and uploaded to encrypted cloud storage they couldn't access. I had footage of every visit they made while I was fighting for my life in the hospital. The next day, Ben and Ryan came over with a police officer to document the state of my apartment. We went through everything methodically, noting what was missing. The cops seemed skeptical at first, another family dispute, until Ben showed him some of the bank records and text messages we'd recovered. I spent the next week gathering more evidence and speaking with investigators. The footage was damning. It showed Dad and Harry making multiple trips with boxes of my belongings, systematically emptying my apartment of anything valuable. I tracked the money through their accounts with help from fraud investigators. The breakdown was almost comical in its selfishness: $49,000 for a cabin renovation deposit, $31,000 to pay off their maxed out credit cards, $22,000 for a used BMW for Harry, $13,000 in cash withdrawals. They spent almost $10,000 in the first 48 hours after taking my money while I was still on a ventilator. Just when I thought things were progressing, we hit a major roadblock. The prosecutor called Ben with concerns about moving forward with criminal charges. The defense will argue they had implied consent as his emergency medical contacts, she explained. They'll claim they were protecting his assets during his incapacity. It's a gray area legally. For a crushing week, it seemed like they might escape with just a civil lawsuit, and civil judgments are hard as hell to collect. Without criminal charges, they could drag the process out for years or declare bankruptcy to avoid repayment. Then a breakthrough came from the most unexpected source: the hospital chaplain. Apparently he had visited me several times during my stay, which I don't remember at all, and had some interesting conversations with my family. They asked unusual questions about medical power of attorney processes, what happens to someone's assets if they don't make it, how long patients are usually confused after septic shock. The chaplain had kept detailed notes as part of the hospital's patient records. His documentation provided crucial evidence of premeditation. They weren't just opportunistically stealing, they were actively planning how to take control of everything I owned while hoping I'd either die or be too impaired to stop them. With this new evidence, the criminal case was back on track. Arrest warrants were issued for wire fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. During this time, I maintained minimal contact with my family, telling them I was focusing on recovery. I declined Sunday dinners and ignored most calls. When I did talk to them, I played the role of someone still dealing with brain fog from my illness, acting confused and slow. They grew increasingly anxious as days passed and started sending relatives and family friends to check on me. My aunt showed up unannounced one day, all concerned, saying, "Your parents are worried sick about you, they've done so much for you, and you're shutting them out." I just nodded and said I needed rest. I didn't tell her that what they'd done for me was rob me of every penny I'd saved over years of working my ass off. The investigators advised me to keep playing dumb until they were ready to move. If they suspected anything, they'd start hiding assets and covering tracks. Right now, they thought they had gotten away with it. Mom called almost daily with transparent excuses to check if I was accessing my accounts or asking questions. "Do you need me to pay any bills for you? Has your work contacted you about payment? Do you want me to check your mail for bank statements?" Each call was harder than the last. Every fake concerned question made me want to scream, but I kept it together, knowing the case was building. While waiting for the arrests, I changed every password and security question for every account and added extra verification steps for any financial transactions. The physical recovery was brutal. The massive abdominal infection had done a number on my body. I lost more weight in the hospital, most of it muscle, could barely walk a few blocks without getting winded, and the surgical wound got infected twice. By the 5th week after discharge, the investigators said they were ready to move forward with arrests. They gave me the option to be present when they served the warrants. I declined. I didn't need to see them in handcuffs to know justice was being served. Actually, I didn't want to see them at all. I was sickened enough. The arrests happened on a Tuesday morning, 5 weeks after my discharge. I was at a coffee shop across town when the detective called to confirm they had all three in custody. Instead of feeling the satisfaction I expected, I just felt numb, like the final scene in a movie that should never have been made. The calls started pouring in that evening. Family, friends, distant relatives, my parents' neighbors. Word spread like wildfire through our community. There must be some mistake. How could you do this to your own parents? They were just trying to help you. I didn't bother arguing or explaining. I sent the same text to anyone who contacted me. My family robbed me while I was fighting for my life in the hospital. They are now facing the legal consequences of that decision. Please don't ask more questions. Most people backed off after that. A few doubled down with but their family guilt trip. I blocked those numbers without responding. After nearly dying and then being robbed by the people who raised me, I had zero tolerance left for emotional manipulation. My parents couldn't make bail. Turned out their financial situation was even worse than I thought. Despite stealing over $125,000 from me, they were still underwater on everything. Harry was released on a lower bond paid by one of his wannabe music producer friends. 3 days after the arrests, Harry showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door like a maniac and screaming loud enough for the whole building to hear. "Open up, you piece of, and you're killing Mom, she's having panic attacks in jail." I didn't respond, I just called the police while he continued his tirade through the door. When officers arrived, they reminded him that contacting me violated his bail conditions. He was taken back into custody on the spot. It's weird how you can grow up with someone, share the same blood, and end up complete strangers, enemies. In my case, the evidence against them was overwhelming. The DA offered plea deals, reduced sentences in exchange for full restitution and guilty pleas. Their court-appointed attorney practically begged them to take it. To pay the restitution, they had to sell their house and cash out Dad's retirement account. Harry had to surrender the BMW and all the recording equipment purchased with my money. My grandfather's watch was never recovered. He claimed it got misplaced during the cleaning of my apartment. Translation: probably pawned for quick cash. The sentencing hearing was surreal. I didn't yell or break down crying, I just laid out the facts. The judge wasn't nearly as reserved. The calculated nature of this crime committed against your own son while he was gravely ill demonstrates a shocking moral bankruptcy, she said before delivering the sentences. Dad and Mom, 14 months in state prison, 3 years probation, and full restitution. Harry, 8 months in county jail, 5 years probation, and 500 hours community service. Throughout the entire legal process, not one of them ever admitted what they did was wrong. They maintained it was all a misunderstanding, that they were safeguarding my money, that they planned to pay it back eventually. Not once did any of them apologize, not even when facing actual prison time. Dad tried to give a statement about how they had sacrificed everything for me growing up. The judge cut him off mid-sentence. Please don't insult this court's intelligence by portraying yourself as a sacrificing parent. That was the closest thing to satisfaction I felt during the whole process. 2 weeks after sentencing, I accepted a transfer to my company's Seattle office. My boss had been incredibly supportive throughout everything, and when a position opened on the West Coast, he suggested the change might do me good. I was still physically weak from the ordeal and knew distance might be the best medicine now. So I sold most of my belongings, packed what mattered into my car, and drove west. The trip took twice as long as planned. I could only drive a few hours before needing to rest. The drive gave me a lot of time to think about family, trust, and starting over when all your plans have been derailed. I kept coming back to one question: how do you reconcile the parents who tucked you in as a kid with the same people who would steal from you while you were fighting for your life? There's no self-help book for that. I arrived in Seattle. My new apartment was smaller than my old place. The first few months were rough. I didn't know anyone, was still having health issues from the infection and surgery. About 4 months after moving, I received a 15-page letter from Mom, forwarded through my attorney, full of self-pity, justification, and subtle blame. After everything we sacrificed for you appeared 4 separate times, yet not once did it contain a genuine apology. I started to write a response several times, that I understood why they did it? That I forgave them? That we could repair this? I can't, and we won't. I finally wrote a single line: don't contact me again. My attorney forwarded it to the prison. I worked. The company put me on light duty until I regained strength, desk work reviewing other inspectors' reports instead of climbing around ships myself. I socialized too little, but slowly things started to shift. I joined a rowing club, good exercise for rebuilding strength without stressing my surgical scars, and started talking to people outside of work. When people inevitably asked about my family, I developed a standard response: we're not close. Most people took the hint and changed the subject. It's been 11 months now since I moved to Seattle. 11 months of starting over, rebuilding from scratch. If you've never had to completely restart your life in your mid-30s, let me tell you, it's not how anyone plans to spend their time. My job has been the one consistent positive. Maritime risk assessment may not sound exciting to most people, but there's something calming about the inspection process. The money situation has mostly resolved. The courts were efficient about liquidating my parents' assets to repay what they stole. Dad's business proceeds were garnished when they sold it. Mom's retirement account was seized. Harry had to surrender pretty much everything he owned of value. I got back around 85% of the original amount, which is apparently a win in these cases. Harry got released a few months ago and immediately violated probation by trying to contact me again, this time through a mutual cousin who hadn't gotten the memo. The cousin called saying Harry was really sorry, had changed, and wanted to make amends. I told him about the restraining order and hung up. The probation officer finally threatened to send him back to jail if he didn't stop. That seems to have worked, at least for now. For a while I was obsessed with understanding why they did it, spent hours dissecting every memory, looking for signs I'd missed. But the truth is simpler and harder to accept. Some people are just wired to take advantage of others, even those they're supposed to love. My family saw my medical crisis not as something to help me through, but as an opportunity to exploit. That's a tough pill to swallow. There's no satisfying explanation that makes it make sense. I've learned that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the coworker who checks in when you miss a day, the neighbor who brings soup when you're sick, the friend who listens without judgment when you finally share pieces of your story. I'm not going to pretend I'm completely healed or that I found some profound silver lining in all this. I'd trade all the life lessons to have never gone through it. But I'm functioning, working, building new connections. That counts for something. The other day I was reviewing inspection reports at my desk when a notification popped up on my phone. A photo memory from 4 years ago. Thanksgiving dinner with my family. Everyone smiling at the camera like we were normal, happy, connected. I deleted it and turned off all memory notifications. Some things aren't worth remembering. Some people aren't worth forgiving.